I'm going to move in now to my presentation, and I'm going to talk a little bit today. Not the smoothest transition I've ever done, admittedly. Here we go. I'm going to talk about the socialized enterprise. And building the socialized enterprise, and what being socialized means. And what I talked about earlier is that it's really important, I think, that in many organizations, they believe that, like the marketing department will believe social media belongs to them. Well, it belongs to us. These messages are going out in public. We have to vet them. We have to make sure they're perfect. And the legal department says, but before you put them out, we'd like to vet them, each and every one of them. Every message, every tweet, to make sure that it's on the right side of the law. And then the senior executive or the CEO says, she goes, I'm the vision of the business. I'm really the forward-facing brand of the organization. I should be having control over this. And the sales department goes, come on. These are prospects out there. We should be using these tools to connect with the marketplace. And customer service says, after you close them, someone's got to service that client, and that's us. And when they complain, we have to deal with that. We should be in the social web. And the answer is everyone should be. That a truly evolved, mature social business is one that uses social media to its maximum. They truly open up those channels of communication across the board within those organizations. So I'm going to talk a little bit about today's consumer, tomorrow's boss. We might be working for that guy one day soon. His name is Gibson. He's 8 years old. He's my son. And I remember sitting down with him at that time when he was 8. He's 11 now. And him and I were kind of just sitting on the couch together watching TV. And as we were watching television, we were sitting there, and this ad came on in between the cartoons. And it was this sort of remote-controlled truck bouncing through the air, and another one came through, and these two little boys were having a ton of fun. And this booming voice from Mattel came in and talked about how fantastic these toys were. And I was getting pretty excited. I thought, oh, right, I'm going to buy those for me. I mean him. So I looked over, and I said, pretty cool, huh? And he looked at me, and he went, Dad, I think they're going to break. And he looked at me like, do you actually believe marketing? Do you actually believe that stuff they put on TV, Dad? Or, that's not where you get the truth. That's not where you get good information on cool toys. You know where you get them? You get them from your friends and your neighbors. And today, whether we're talking about government or large institutions, we trust our friends in our community much more than those traditional structures of authority. And this goes right down to marketing as well. And the social web's an extension of that. Now, one of the challenges that people have when they look at it is that it's a difficult concept to get their head around the fact that we no longer own our brand, period. And George Moen's not here today, but or right now. He'll be here this afternoon for the Social CEOs panel, which you don't want to miss. I can't wait to put him and Jeff Booth on the same panel and then put these two other people between them. It's going to be fun. And so as we look at it, George sat me down, or I sat him down. He says, let's explain this social stuff to me. And I searched his brand name for him, Blends Coffee, through Twitter, local Twitter search in the local area. And because he didn't know if they should really be focusing on it at that point. And the first few tweets were things like, I love my latte, and at my favorite blends. And he's like, huh. And the next one was, the Wi-Fi sucks here. This coffee tastes like it's burned. That barista's a jerk. And worse things like that. And then Blends Coffee is awesome again. And then I prefer this. And so there was this good, bad, ugly, and everything in between. And he looked at me and he said, how do I make them stop? I said, you can't. You can't make them stop, George. He says, can we do something? Can we litigate? No, it's going to make it worse. So the only thing you can do today is you can lead the conversation. You can't stop the conversation. As a brand, the only thing you can do is lead it. Yesterday, I spoke at a conference for the Municipal Information Systems Association, basically all the geeks that run the technology in all the municipalities in British Columbia. And one of the things we looked at is leadership today means that government is no longer a structure as much as a platform for communities to connect and collaborate. And if we don't provide those platforms for people as corporations much in the same way, they're going to go outside the fold and collaborate and connect. They're going to talk about our brand unofficially instead of pulling them to the fold and really leveraging those communications. So Bruce Phillip, anybody ever read any of Bruce's stuff? First book he wrote is called The Orange Code. He wrote it with the CEO of ING. This latest book he's written is called Consumer Republic, and I've done a pretty extensive interview with him on my podcast, and we tweet back and forth on a regular basis. But my favorite part of the interview is when he says something very simple. Today, Shane, remember, he comes from a traditional branding agency, quite a successful one in Toronto that he sold recently. And he said today, one of the reasons he says why he moved out of that business and really into speaking and strategy, he said, is today, marketing is not an ad. Marketing is a conversation. Marketing is a conversation. Every little dialogue that our brand has with other people online, through our blogs, through networks, and they have about us, is today now our marketing. So it's also about trust, though. And there's a real challenge here with trust, is that this was done by Edelman. Edelman does a trust barometer annually, extensive study, 25 countries. Their sample group is between 25 and 45 years old. These individuals are in the top 25% of income in their country. And they indexed globally people's sentiment. At the top is technology, which is interesting. And it says, how much do you trust the following industries to do what is right? The bottom, interesting, financial services, banks, insurance. But you know what? Media, brewing and spirits, personal health care products, consumer packaged goods, energy, pharmaceutical, you name it. Even the best ones still, you think about it, look at these numbers right in the middle, like entertainment. You know, that's like 37% of people don't trust them. That's a huge part of the market, right? And it gets worse. And so when we look at this, is that a big part of it is that many of these industries, in my opinion, why they don't, same reason why Christian doesn't trust them, my son, is they're not involved in the conversation. They're not involved in the community. They're not connecting in an intimate way. And I think that's really, really hurting enterprise. So let's look at the stages of trust. So I'm going to just look here and make sure I know how much time I have before I go any further. I gave everybody a serious talking to about staying on time, and now I'm realizing that I want to make sure I finish on time. Perfect. Okay, so I got a fair bit of time. So these are the 5 relationship development stages. Now, I believe in social media, or in real life, just like social media, you should give attribution. So I didn't create this model. Actually, my father created this model over a decade ago, and he developed when we were working with commercial banks and business-to-business selling scenarios and looked at how trust is built. And I think it's interesting to look at the stages we go through with our clients and how social media plays a role in this. So when you start off with, in any relationship, let's forget about business right now. Let's talk about, dating. Let's talk about dating. So at the attraction stage in business, or the attraction stage in a personal life, is what we'd call flirtation. You've just met someone, you've made a comment, they've reacted, and how in-depth are you being at this point in most cases? Right? Surface level. We're going to look at, is this person got the potential to be a stalker or a weirdo? Are they funny? Are they attractive? May we have something in common? But in most cases, it's extremely surface level, and it almost happens in an instant. Then the next stage is the exploration stage. So this is what we would call a few dates. We go on a few dates, we get to know the person, we have a little dialogue. At this point, even if you really like them, you wouldn't want to really pour your heart out at that point, because you're not sure where they're at this point, right? And so there's a bit of testing to see what they're about and looking at boundaries and looking for commonalities. And then finally, you kind of hit the moment of truth. And before we can move in the development stage, which is really steady dates and a certain level of commitment. And that typically comes in the form of a little test in many cases, kind of a series of them. One of them I would call the in-law ambush. Anybody been on one of those? Right? It's where, all of a sudden they're invited to something and the in-laws are there, or their best friends are there, and it's the acid test, or they're 10 minutes late and they see how you respond to it, whether you're going to freak out about it or you're cool about it, or whatever it is, but there's a few little tests that we go through, and then finally, we qualify to qualify. We move into the development stage. This is steady dates. And so at this point, which is interesting, is this is where trust actually begins in the development stage. This is where you share enough about yourself that they learn about you. They share about themselves so you understand them. And at this point, there's a really good understanding about what each other wants. And there's a real understanding of how compatible you are and what you need to do to move forward. And at this point, sometimes people exit, right? Some people skip right to the commitment stage and then exit later when they figure that out. But ideally, we move to the development stage. So then we move into the commitment stage, or what we call engagement. And I guess the difference between engagement, I think, and the unity stage in a personal relationship is at the engagement stage, there's still one person kind of selling. There's a bit of chasing going on still. And then once that's done, then we move into the unity stage, trust advisor and partner, where I need you as much as you need me. And there's unity in planning. There's unity in your life goals. So as we move through these stages, what's interesting is imagine that you're on a first date with somebody. Right? You're on a first date, and no, second date. Let's say second date. You're on a second date, you're getting along really well, and this person finally says to you, you're sitting down on this date, and he looks at you and says, Kathy, we've been really, it's been really great, and I've really enjoyed you, and we both like social media, and we're into photography, and we have a lot of fun together, and I know there's going to be a couple of dates, but would you marry me? What's your answer?
Not yet.
Not yet. She's nice. You know what? Most people would say, let me think about that. I'll put my coat on, and then she'd go to the maitre d' and go, block him, would you? I'm going to go get a restraining order immediately, right? And that would be her strategy. And so in most cases, that's a serious alarm bell that goes off. Now, we wouldn't do this in a personal relationship, but here's my question. Why do we do it all the time in business? Think about it. Think about that person we just met, and they go for the hard close. Think about that person we just followed on Twitter, and they blast us with a direct message about the latest promotion. Think about that person you connect with on LinkedIn. They think that's their right to blast information about every event they're doing the next week, pitching you on it. I think we look at is that trust, because people are already skeptical of organizations, I think we don't spend enough time, even on a digital level, building rapport with people, asking questions, monitoring, absorbing information, understanding where it hurts, understanding where their goals are, understanding where they want to go, and at that point, having really specific and relevant conversations and value-added interactions. And what happens if you don't do that, you don't get to go to the development stage. And in business, by the way, if you've got a potential $100,000 a year client who's only spending $5,000 with you, you want to get them to the development stage. Anybody here ever been frustrated with a client because you feel like they just don't tell you the truth? Right? They're like, they lied to me. That's not what their problem is. That's not the problem with their business. Do you know what? It's not that they lied to you as much as you haven't hit the development stage. When you hit the development stage, trust begins and they share real information on how you can help them. They also, at this point, are learning more about you, which again is what your social media, for everything from your blogs to your Facebook to your LinkedIn to your podcast to your video helps the client do. But as their knowledge of you increases and your knowledge of them increases, then it increases your capacity to do business with people. Then they begin to tell you the truth because they trust you. I think too often we don't spend time cementing those relationships. And in the social web, because it's so surface level, if we don't dig deeper as an organization with those contacts, we're not going to maximize that business. So let's look at the numbers quickly. 750 million people on Facebook, 100 million people on LinkedIn, accounting for every Fortune 500 company and major government in the world, and everything in between. Twitter's 100 million updates a day, and their growth curve has looked like something like this. Okay, this is from their blog. And so if anybody talks about the fact that Twitter is dead or slowing down really doesn't understand it. Like it's moving fast. It's still growing, expanding internationally. It's expanding in its relevancy, and the people who are using it are maturing in essence in the way they use it. So second biggest search engine on the planet is Twitter. So you've got Google, you've got search.twitter.com with the second most searches per day. Anybody know what number 3 is? YouTube, absolutely. Number 4 and 5 is Bing and Yahoo, distantly trailing. Okay, so what's interesting is that 2 of the top 3 are really purely social search engines. So YouTube's 1 billion views a day of video, which, by the way, does not make it the biggest video site for views on the world. There's one out of China, which I can't pronounce the name, that has more views per day, coming from that country, of course. So this is one of my favorite quotes. If you've gone to any of my seminars, you've probably seen it, but it goes like this. If you think you're a leader and no one is following you, you're actually just going for a walk. Leadership is the real key, I believe, more so than marketing savvy from a social media perspective. And the challenge is, of course, is there's so much noise out there that it's not just enough to produce content. We have to produce thought-provoking, thought leadership level content as an organization if we're going to stand out. So who's seen this model before? Anybody? A couple of you, right? So probably. And this is the model that Steve Jagger and I put together called the sociable matrix. And really what it looks at is the levels of engagement various stakeholders have in an organization or with you from a social media perspective. And it really depends upon their use. So the first level of engagement in social media is the disengaged. So this particular person, and I hate to pick on my dad, but my father, now he's not this way now. He's like Skyping me, he's tweeting me, he's Facebooking me, he's emailing me, he's texting me, like he's on board now. But this goes back about 4 years ago where I went to South Africa, where our office is there. We've got an office in South Africa in our sales training business. And I always wondered why, even if I stayed up till midnight and emailed Dad, it still took him like an hour and a half to email me back. And I knew he's in the office. And it would drive me crazy. Like, I know he's sitting at his desk. I know he heard the little, you've got mail thing, or whatever the South African version is, and he would take him an hour and a half to get back. So finally I was at his office there, and to my horror, I found out why. I saw his personal assistant walking down the hall with what appeared to be an email printed off. And she walked into his desk, which has no computer on it, by the way, and she put it on his desk. And he read it, he flipped it over, he handwrote the answer, and she walked back down the hall where she's going to reply to his email. There's a couple of reasons why this horrified me. Number one, embarrassing that a company which pushes things like customer relations management, technology, and a whole bunch of other things from a sales training perspective, and your chairman doesn't use email. Okay, that kind of freaked me out a little bit. The other side was there was some stuff I sent him that had nothing to do with business, personal things. Also, anybody ever sent an inappropriate email? Come on, a minute, once in a while. Something you thought was funny, right, that you wouldn't want to be public? So I'm not sure what this poor woman thought of me. And so I was a little embarrassed. I said, Dad, we got to get you using your own email. So my brother and I bought him a laptop. And at that time, it was a Dell. And we got him hunting and pecking and emailing and using the PowerPoint and feeling pretty comfortable for about a week before we went back to Canada. We thought, okay, we got him set up. 6, 8 months later, I come back to South Africa, and there's this dude sitting at his desk. There's like 2 desks, actually, they side by side. And I said, who's this? And he said, oh, it's Andre. I said, what's Andre do here? He goes, he operates the laptop. I'm like, oh. I'm like, oh, no. And so this is not a guy you're going to reach with a tweet or YouTube or through LinkedIn or a blog post. Forget it. Okay, so this is a certain quadrant of the market that's just disengaged. Now, this group, more and more, even them are becoming more and more social media literate faster because of how easy it is to use the tools now. But it's still a portion of the market, but not a large portion. Then we move into the passively engaged. And these individuals typically only consume mainstream content. So they'll go to CTV's website because they're comfortable with CTV through traditional media channels. They're comfortable with that, so they'll go on those destinations. They'll head to SFU's website because they're comfortable with the brand offline. If you give them your business card, they'll hit your site because they've met you. But that's their extent of interaction. If you email them a link to a video, they'll click on it and watch it. But they won't hop off and search for stuff on other topics. They tend to be very, very much highly, almost, I would say, not even reactive, but very minimal consumers of online content, particularly social content. Then we move into the reactively engaged. So these people are subscribed to blogs. They've got a Twitter account. They're following a few people. They've got a Facebook profile and a LinkedIn profile, but they both have the same photo, and it's them leaning on a pillar, and it's airbrushed from like 4 years ago. Seen these guys? And all their security settings are locked down. And they basically think that Facebook is for stalking their own children, right? That's kind of their whole thing around that. And so this group, though, are consumers. They are listening. They are pulling in the content you create from a social perspective. But the first time you hear from them, it's something like this. And I get this all the time. Hi, I work with such and such a company. I'm a director of marketing or sales, and I'm on your blog. And they don't comment, hey, great, how do I get in contact with you? They don't email you. They literally will pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm on your blog. And, and this is this type of individual, so they don't tend to be big on feedback or even sharing. They keep it to themselves. But they do consume a lot of content. I find a lot of senior executives fall into this particular category. Then we move into the proactively engaged. So this person is the first person to poke you on Facebook, right? They're out there networking away. If you meet them at this event, before you leave this event, you'll see an invitation from LinkedIn to connect with them, okay? They're very broad in their connections. They're very active. If you're doing a fundraiser, they're the first one to tweet about it. They're at all the major functions. They're supporting people. They're connecting. They're networking. They're contributing. And they get the first part of that model the Board of Trade talks about, which is connecting and contributing to their community. But they also are one of the most frustrated people I meet in social media, because they had a 3-letter conversation with their CEO and they didn't know how to answer it. And you know what those 3 letters were the CEO brought up? Any guess? ROI, right? What's your ROI? They're like, I don't know. And they go back to me and they go, oh, look, I spend about 3 hours a day doing this, and I've been asked to account for my 3 hours a day, and I can't. And the reason why is there's somebody else's super fan. Okay, they're promoting everybody else. They're networking. They're contributing, which is awesome. It is the foundation of a good social media strategy, but we have to go beyond that, and that is to the level of thought leadership. And thought leaders are very important. Number one, From a thought leadership perspective, and I know this term's been overused in many aspects, but here's what it means in this context. A thought leader listens intimately to their core target markets, which means they have them, they understand what they are. They monitor, and they truly understand. They're almost completely in the head of their client and their market. They know where it hurts, they know what solutions they want, they know what their dreams are, and then they provide engaging content and conversations that answer those specific needs of their marketplace on an ongoing basis. And someone says, well, what if I'm not passionate about that? Well, then you're in the wrong business. People say, this blog about my passion. Absolutely. So make sure that you're in the right business and that you can create content you're passionate about. Because the only way, in my opinion, from a thought leadership perspective, that you'll have any type of longevity in your social strategy. So in addition to that, what thought leaders also do is they focus on things bigger than themselves and bigger than their companies. So what I mean by this is they create opportunities for communities to connect, and they create community around these core areas of interest. So a good example, actually, is the Ford Motor Corporation. What's amazing is if you go onto, even if you're not into Fords, okay, but go onto Ford Explorer's Facebook page and look what's going on there. You'll find that, and I don't know the exact stat, I could probably get that from Ford, but I would say upwards of 90% of the conversations about the vehicles are happening between the members of the community. And Ford just kind of stewards those conversations and stimulates them and interacts with them. But to a large degree, they've built a whole community around that Facebook page. Another example of thought leadership is simply Stephen Jagger, my co-author from Sociable. Stephen, one of the things he did is that he brings together through meetup.com, instead of going out and pitching people, he brings in speakers every month for the real estate technology meetup and invites realtors in, of course, that are interested in that. And in many cases, they're sharing in dialogue that they find the real value out of, and he doesn't pitch anything, but at the end of every session, he picks up a few new clients. These are all examples of thought leadership. So less pitching, more listening, more connecting, and build more platforms for community to be built around your brand. So, I don't know why I did that. I'm standing right in front of it. My battery's dying. So, rules of engagement quickly. And these are important. So we talked about how to build a socialized enterprise. In my opinion, if we're going to be highly social and effective, we need to follow these rules. Now, you can break them, but just know the repercussions. Okay, I'm not a big one on following the rules all the time, but these will keep you safe. So number one, stop pitching and start connecting. We talked about that earlier. Me connecting with you on LinkedIn does not give you permission to blast me on a regular basis. Realize that permission to connect is golden and that very few people will give it to you. So once you get it, honor it. Really honor it. Number two, doers win in the game of social media. One of the things we do at Socialized is when we start off a client, we don't just launch in and say, okay, let's get you going. We do an in-depth social media assessment. It usually takes Dave McDonald a couple days to do it as a bare minimum. They get an 18-page report when it's done, a full half-day debrief, and we walk through the whole process with them. And one of the funny things is before we start, they usually say stuff like, well, we're using social media, but it hasn't worked. And we'll go in and we'll see their Twitter account, and it says, hello, world. Anybody here? And they've got like 3 followers and a little egg on it. And then we go in, or a variation of that, and then we go into their blog, and they've done 3 blog posts, 3 months spaced out in between each of them. And they said social media didn't work. Well, the reality is, the reason why is they didn't get in the game. Is that it's not like you get a phone line and advertise it and give it out to people and decide to stop answering it after 3 months. And the reality is that social media is a channel for communications you opened up, and you have to continue to do and be present in that channel for it to really work. Think back to trust. People want to trust that you're going to be there on a consistent basis. It's not about you. Boy, that's a hard one for me. That was so tough. Because, man, when I first started blogging in 2002 and podcasting in 2004, and I think that the first couple of years of blogging were really about me, and the only person that visited my blog was my mom. And it was great. She had great comments and everything, and we interacted a fair bit. It was an awesome platform, but it didn't get me any business. And it wasn't until I started listening from a thought leadership perspective to where it hurt for my clients and started creating content that was of value to them that I got any type of traction. Be fearless in your contribution to community. So if everybody in your marketplace, I don't know, let's say you have info products is what you sell online, and everybody in your marketplace gives away 2-minute teasers and then makes people buy the 10-minute piece. My suggestion is give away 20-minute segments. Give more than your competitors think is practical, and connect more than they think is necessary. So if someone comments on your blog or tweets you a thank you, don't put it on your little scorecard as a marketer to give off to your team to show the level of engagement we got. That's an opportunity to reply, connect, deepen the relationship, take it offline. Okay? And so really, really look at the opportunity is engagement, from an engagement and a contribution perspective, to do more, share more, and connect more than your competitors. Number 5, don't be a social spammer. Social spam is different than what we would call typical spam, where I get Kathy's email address because I pulled it off her website. I just keep hammering her with emails. That's one type of spam. Another type of spam is where you've got 200 contacts in your database, and this particular blog post you have is really only relevant to a quarter of them based upon their market and where they're at, but you send it to all 200. Okay, so 125 or so get an irrelevant content. They're not interested in it. You send enough irrelevant content and stuff that isn't in the right context, and it goes into a folder people never read. Okay, Facebook's another way. You get someone, they build a Facebook page, they run a contest, they got 1,000 fans, and then they just start hammering out the marketing. And they think they're hammering out marketing to 1,000 people, but what's happened is 990 have hit the mute button. And they're actually just talking to themselves on Facebook now. And so realize that permission to connect also comes with the necessity and the commitment to be relevant. Number 6 is be authentic because you don't have a choice. That's a tough one. So if you don't want a picture of you with a lampshade on your head, the latest Christmas party on the internet, stop putting lampshades on your head. Pretty simple strategy, because everybody's afraid of Big Brother, but I'm kind of afraid of you guys. Because you've all got cameras, you've all got video recorders on your phone, and you can publish it to the net instantly if I do something embarrassing, entertaining, or absurd. Especially if it's embarrassing, entertaining, and absurd, it's going to go on the internet immediately. And this goes for corporations, though, too. Let's take it to the corporate level. This is the one that you attract what you are, not what you want. You attract what you are, not what you want. So what occurs is, from a branding perspective, if you're, from an HR perspective, you're telling the world on LinkedIn and you're branding and you're communicating online how fantastic you guys are to work for, and then you treat this person like crap when they start off working for you, or you onboard them improperly, or you don't keep your commitments as an employer, guess what? It ends up on the web. And they don't write a little letter to some ombudsman somewhere in regards to the employment standards. They're going to tell their 1,000 friends. And so the reality is we don't have a choice as corporations. That goes for customers too, of course. We have to be authentic. We don't have to be perfect, but we have to be authentic. We have to walk our talk. And lastly, and this was the biggest challenge for me in most cases, is be consistent. So the core rule of engagement is consistent application. Jay Levinson, my co-author from Guerrilla Social Media Marketing, he said this like 2 decades ago, and it's a great saying. And what he said was, mediocre done consistently will beat brilliant once every time. If we don't have to blog every single day, we don't have to hit it with massive power, but you know what? If we do it a couple times a week and we keep it doing it consistently, and we don't have to spell everything right or be perfect or totally on message every time, but we do it on an ongoing basis, it's a lot more powerful than that one brilliant post you write. So, I'm going to tell a quick story about how I met Jeff Booth and from BuildDirect.com, who's going to be here later today speaking about how they built their enterprise as a truly social enterprise from the ground up. And I met Jeff because my phone rang at 6:45 in the morning, and I thought it was someone from Toronto, because only someone from Toronto would call you at 6:45 in the morning in Vancouver in most cases. But I sleep with my phone. Anybody else sleep with their phone? Right? Yeah. It's an iPhone 4, right? So you're like, is it still there? So I just, once in a while, there's little heart palpitations in the middle of the night. I think it's gone, and it's there. So anyway, so the phone rings, and I answer the phone. Or actually, I don't answer the phone because I'm in bed, and you got the frog in your throat or whatever, and you're like, oh, who's this? And you're like, okay. So then I listened to the message, the CEO of Build Direct. So I got up, and I got dressed, because I don't like to cold call naked anymore. And it's awkward when you meet them for the first time. And anyway, so he insisted I come down to his office that day. It was quite urgent. And when I sat down with him, a strange thing happened. The conversation was 45 minutes long, but it was like I fed him all his notes. Like he just asked me every perfect question you could ever ask me to do business with me. And I thought, this is strange. This is so easy. What's coming? Like he's going to tell me he wants to give me stock and not pay me cash. Or he's going to tell me he wants to, he doesn't want to pay my rate. Or I don't know what it is, but it felt awkward. It was just too good to be true. Then he asked me to come back and meet his marketing team, and I thought, aha, here's where they're going to rake me over the coals. They're going to scrutinize. They're going to give it to me. Good cop, bad cop. Nope. They liked me as well. They were super great. It was super easy. And then they said something that kind of freaked me out. They said, okay, we'd like a proposal for a 6-month contract. We want you to come in every day, once a week, plus once a month we want to meet with senior executives. We want to really roll your sleeves up and commit to this process. And the dollar numbers are kind of cha-chinging in my head, but I'm going, that's a huge commitment after an hour-and-a-half meeting. Like, this doesn't make sense to me still. So I lobbed this number out, and Jeff went, I went, okay. So I wrote the proposal. It went off to him. And I got a call literally the next day, and it was Rona, and she said, Mr. Gibson, would you please, who works with Jeff, would you please come down and pick up your deposit check? We want to start on Friday. I went, wow, that's pretty amazing. And of course, and I was still going, why do they like me? Like, this doesn't make sense. Like, I really didn't close the deal. I didn't feel like I even deserved it. But I don't go over to Jeff's office and pick up the check and go, hey, why do you like me? Right? You take the check, you do the business, you do the work, and you thank God that this, like, check fell from heaven, which is basically kind of what it felt like. I couldn't figure out how this happened, but I was excited. And so, anyway, I went to work, but after, like, I don't know, 3 months, I'd been to Jeff's 40th birthday party. I'd been out for beer with him and the team. We had some heart-to-heart chats, and I felt comfortable enough with him. So I sat down in Jeff's office, right across from him. And I kind of sat across from him. And we were pretty well this close. And I said to Jeff, and I kind of went through what I told you. I said, this just didn't make sense. I got to be honest. It was too easy. Why do you like me? And he leaned over real close, and he said, you have me from hello. And I went, whoa, hey, thanks, Jeff. How about those Canucks, eh? Woo! And I kind of like, it kind of freaked me right out. A little too friendly. And then he laughs, and he says, actually, Shane, you give away 30 hours of free audio on your website on sales and marketing, and my team and I have used it. You gave away entire manuals and posts, and you actually give away more for free than your competitors do paid. And he said, so I figured that, if you give that away for free, you must do some really cool stuff in-house. He said, plus we're following you on Twitter, and for better or for worse, we know what you have for breakfast, where you drink beer, and what your opinions are in politics. And you also publish your entire client list on your blog. So I hopped on there, and there was an insurance company here, a local one, a fairly large one, that he sat on the board of directors for a YPO with her, and he phoned her up and said, should I hire him? And she said, yeah. So he said, before you walked in my door, I basically decided I was doing business with you as long as you were in person as engaging as you were online. Because sometimes people miss. Sometimes they're really fun online and not so much in person. And so Lorraine claims I'm slightly schizophrenic between Twitter and Facebook, but we'll talk about that later. There are split personalities, what you call me. And so when we look at this, this is the reverse drip. In other words, traditional marketing is I get your email address and I blast stuff at you. I send invites to you. If I'm a realtor, I'm going to drop calendars off, and I'm going to leave things for you, and I'm going to knock on your door. Or from an insurance perspective, people are going to keep pushing information at you. A stockbroker is going to keep throwing various company offerings at you. But who feels over-dripped? Who's trying to turn that tap off as quickly as possible and find ways to hide from the marketers, right? We all are. Because it's just too much information. And what's happening now is we want to consume, maybe it's video, it might be text, it might be audio, it might be a Twitter stream, it might be an in-depth blog, but we want to consume it on our terms, on our time, in our own medium. And it better have some really good, relevant content. And that's really the reverse drip and how thought leadership works today from a social media perspective. It's my belief that it's really switched the power to the consumer and has forced us to really be attraction marketers versus blurters and pushers. The other challenge, and Meena Sandhu is going to talk about this today. She works with ING Direct. The other challenge, of course, is that social media belongs to everyone. And I said this earlier, is that it's not about just the marketing department or just one person, but in my opinion, to socialize an enterprise, we want to equip as many people in our organization as possible with the rules of engagement and the understanding of how to use the tools. So I met Peter Aceto through Twitter. They have, I think, close to $40 billion of assets under management here in Canada. It's a fairly decent-sized bank. And I met him because I started following on Twitter, and I thought, I wonder if this is really the CEO. And so what I did is, I started like poking these little questions at him, sort of trivia about who he was and what he was about. And finally, he just came out and said, "Is this really the CEO, or is this just a marketing team? This is a pretty smooth ploy." And I wasn't believing. He says, "No, I'm the CEO." I said, "Okay, what are you doing right now?" It's like an aggressive Twitter question. He says, "I go to play hockey." And I went, "Oh, doesn't sound like a marketing answer." And as we interacted more, it was a CEO. This is one of the first CEOs I found on Canada that was actually on there. And I tweeted a leadership quote, and he retweeted it. Well, that was kind of cool, so I grabbed one of his and I retweeted it, and then we had some dialogue. Again, we weren't like two teenagers at night, like tweeting or texting each other all night or anything like that, but we had about 20 or 30 little conversations over a month and built some rapport. And then when I actually DM'd him and said, Peter, could Steve and I interview you for our book? We're coming to Toronto next week. We'd love to buy you dinner. And we thought he'd invite us to his office and have a coffee like in the foyer for like 5 minutes. But he said, yeah, pick the place. It ended up being a 3-hour dinner and a fantastic interview and now a very good relationship with ING. But the whole point is that the CEO was on and engaged. But then he didn't leave it at that. Then, of course, at each local cafe, for instance, at Orange YVR is the local Twitter account for ING. And they interact at the local level with the community. Because what they realize is that's where the true power is. The true power in social is not to broadcast, but in my opinion, to get hyper-local and hyper-segment. In addition to that, beyond that, at the very beginning, Peter even encouraged Mina to get on as her own brand and interact with the community on behalf of ING and herself. And so what he realized, and what they realized, is that there was no real separation of ING and self, that we're on all the time. And so instead, he embraced that and supported her. And by doing this, they've been highly effective and had some massive results being social. But the lesson is learned here is it's not just about one department, it's about socializing the business. Now, I've got a few minutes left here. I want to talk a little bit about listening and monitoring. How many people here actively monitor the social web? Okay, so a few of us. And social media monitoring is absolutely vital. In fact, in many cases, we talk about, without social media monitoring, I don't believe we can effectively be thought leaders over the long term because we don't really understand our market and what's going on. So, some of the tools that I use, just in case you're not using them, search.twitter.com. But get creative and guerrilla about it. Like people use it to search their brand name. But search about things that your market would talk about, not just your brand name. And even before I head to a city, anybody have to travel and go to different cities for business and market and connect with people? So what I tend to do about a month before I go to a new city, or longer if I can, I do a local search for keywords mentioned by Twitterers in that city. I start connecting with them, I put them on a list, and I interact with them for maybe 6 weeks. And then about 2 weeks before I go, I reach out to the bigger influencers and the one that I build a good relationship with, and I suggest we have a tweet up. Okay, and we pull people together, or I meet with them individually. And what happens is when I hit a city, I've got 9 or 10 good relationships to start off with in that market, in addition to the business I've got there. So think about other ways to utilize it, not just to monitor and click off our scorecard and look for negative sentiment, but for ways to really understand and find new markets and connect with people. Google Alerts is huge. I think we all use google.com/alerts. Yes, most of us. So Google Alerts is amazing because Google, I think even a couple of years ago, you would get if somebody mentioned your brand or a competitor's brand online or something you're interested in that you signed up for an alert on it, you'd get it in about a day. Now, when it's mentioned, usually it's minutes that Google has found that particular update and sent it to you. Little word of caution, one of my clients, Vanita, I called her up one day and said, because I got a Google alert that they got CMABC got an award from the Canadian Marketing Association. And I called her up and said, congratulations. It was like 9 in the morning, and Vanita goes, for what? I go, for your award. She goes, what award? I got the one from the Canadian Marketing Association for the rebranding you've done around certified management accountants. She goes, I wasn't aware I've got one. She goes, where did you hear this? I go, it's on their website. She goes, you were just digging through their website and you found that? And I said, no, actually, I got a Google alert. She goes, you mean you're stalking me? No, good thing we're friends, okay, I can tell you. Because I think I weirded her right out there for that day. I'm like, I didn't mean to, Vanita. Honestly, I got an email saying that. And she kind of laughed. So be careful with that, by the way. Just because your client checks in at a restaurant doesn't mean you can show up there, for instance, on Foursquare. So LinkedIn groups, questions, and networks are great places to dig. Who's using linkedin.com/signal? Okay, so linkedin.com/signal is a lot like Twitter search. But the difference is you're only searching the conversations happening in your network. So the bigger your network, or the more diverse your network, the more data you get from your network. And it's a free type of search. And for me, it's amazing because I've found people like 3 levels deep who are talking about a seminar I've done or one of my books or a topic that I'm interested in, and I would have never known that they were, and then I'm able to ask for an introduction and connect with them. And so it's been a really great way to broaden, but also I can just hear mentions of our brand online and what's going on. So Google blog search, why I like this, and I use it in addition to Google Alerts, is I set up keywords in the search, and then what I do is I only want the keywords from the last 24 hours. So what Google does is only tell me the most recent blog posts with that term, and then I subscribe to it as a feed. And what that does is it gives me ongoing alerts on a specific topic through blogs that are only relevant and recent. So anyways, customer blogs and social networks, of course, and competitor news blogs and social networks. Are you subscribed to all your client blogs and newsletters? So it gives you an incredible amount of business intelligence. And the key factor here, and the important reason, is, if we look at the past, right, this is sort of the way suggestions happened. And George Moen talked about this at Blend's Coffee. He said, the challenge here, he says, is in the past, if someone didn't like what we were doing here at Blends, is they would go and put a little comment in that comment box. And if the franchisee was honest and wasn't throwing out negative comments, which happens the odd time as well, they would give it to our regional director, who would then bring it to the marketing team, who would collate it all, and about 3 months down the road, I would eventually find out what was going on at that store. He said, today, this is after, of course, today, he says, I just search for what's going on with our brand from Twitter, and I hear right in the front lines that minute. He says, and I hear all kinds of things, like I'll hear that people just had a Blends Coffee and Make-A-Wish thanking them for sponsorship, but also this particular individual complaining about the fact that the Wi-Fi is basically dead. But it gives George and his team an opportunity to immediately pick up the phone or deal with that situation in real time and actually know what's going on with the enterprise's success with engaging customers in the instant. And that's the real opportunity, is instant feedback. He also found out a strange thing he didn't know. People like to post pictures of their coffees. It was the most common thing he found. He's like, this is really weird. He says, there's all these latte photos. He said, this is not what I expected when they started doing research. So what did? They built a blog or a site where you can upload your photos of your lattes, tweet about it, and win a prize. And that even stimulated the brand more. But he didn't realize this, and he wouldn't have known this if they weren't listening to their customers. Here's the challenge. What do most people use social media monitoring for? This, scorekeeping. They bring their report card in the senior execs and say, look at all this engagement. And it's a report with all kinds of charts and pie graphs and lines going up. But at the end of the day, they've missed the real opportunity. The real opportunity, now you have to do this to measure and improve, but the real opportunity is this. This is what I like social media monitoring for. It's a flare. There's a customer or a person you didn't know exists, and it pops up. They like something. They retweet it. They make a comment. And at this point, then what you do is you don't just say, oh, there they are, isn't that cool? You go over there, you meet with them, you connect with them, you deepen the relationship at that point of high engagement. So here's a bit more on monitoring. Who's seen this movie, Avatar? Here's something interesting. HP Labs predicted 6 months before the movie hit where it would rank in the box office and against where the other 25 movies that are going to come out at that time ranked. And they, to deadly accuracy, were even able to talk about the take at the box office and the long tail success of each of these movies after the box office. How did they do it? Their computer scientists analyzed 3 million tweets 6 months in advance. They looked at the velocity of tweets and the sentiment of each tweet. And they predicted the ongoing success of each movie. And their predictions were incredibly close. So your capacity to monitor and then use this information effectively does a lot more than just say, hey, they like us. You can really be able to, from your industry perspective, even be able to predict trends and where things are going. So, oops, there it goes again. So one of the tools that I like to use to organize this, just a quick suggestion, is if you're not using one, use a social media monitoring dashboard, in my opinion, if you've got it in your budget. Okay, now some of them are quite expensive. Some of them start as little as $30 a month. And something like Sysomos goes up from there. We use Sysomos within our organization, and it's a really effective way to monitor client campaigns, sentiment, and what's happening. But in addition to this, Sysomos Heartbeat actually enables us to identify actual influencers, how they're connected, who they're connected with, and then specifically reach out to them. So these are a couple tools that I've found very engaging. In addition to this is a big one. The last one I would suggest is make sure that you're using some type of social CRM. So this one's free. So who here uses Gmail primarily for a lot of your communications? Okay, and so Outlook. Anybody else? Outlook. So a few Outlooks. So Gmail. So this will integrate with either Gmail or Outlook. And what Nimble, it's nimble.com. I talked to John Ferreira, who's the founder of Nimble. He originally founded Goldmine back in the day, one of the original CRMs. Sold it when he was 40, retired for 9 years, and just this year did this, dusted off, says, okay, I'm going back to work. It's a whole new game, and the game is social. So what they did is they built a platform, and you connect with this, and you connect it with either your Gmail or your LinkedIn. It pulls in your contacts and all the history of your communications. Then you click Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, and then it pulls in all of that data from your network and who you're connected with, and then it finds common occurrences. And this one's Anthony Caridi, my business partner. I didn't tell them anything else, but I just clicked all the buttons, and all of a sudden what showed up was his Twitter feed. If you rolled down, it's his blog feed. It's every message him and I have had back and forth via email, via Twitter, via Facebook, all in one dashboard and updated in real time. The cool thing is, I don't have to stay in here to tweet him. If I go out and tweet and interact with him, it saves that information. I then could assign that tweet to someone within my team on Nimble, and they can take action. So it actually is an incredible social media management tool. And it's a great method to take a very messy way of communicating with clients and now put it in a common place. And you can have multiple people in your team with Nimble accounts, so you're all contributing to the data and the relationship with those various clients, and it's all pulled into one place, organized neatly, where you can actually drive it into business goals. By the way, for individuals, any guess how much this costs as an individual to use? It's free. It's absolutely free. Okay, it's only going to cost more money when it's $5 a month for each employee as you add people. So people say, so do you still use Hootsuite? My answer is absolutely. And it doesn't matter I'm using Hootsuite because it still records all the interactions I've had on Hootsuite and turns it into business flow. But the reason why I use Hootsuite.com is Hootsuite enables me to tweet to multiple accounts, send out timed tweets, and it gives me really deep data integrated with Google Analytics as to what people are responding through right from my tweets right down into my site. And so I use them both. It's not either or. So if you're going to have a socialized enterprise, then get organized with your social interaction and really make sure you have a social CRM. So the last couple of things, I got 2 more slides here, is number one is that we talked about our book. I talked earlier about Stephen Jagger and I wrote a book called Sociable. And the Sociable meme kind of steals from the ethos of meetup.com, and that is our goal to be sociable is to actually use the internet to get off the internet. Does that make sense? Use the internet to get off. People say, how do you create ROI? In social media? My answer is, you know what? Take that light bit of rapport you have with someone online who's open to connecting and deepen it. Pick up the phone eventually. Have a Skype call with him like Jean Ferreira and I did from Nimble, and he converted me instantly after that and turned me into an advocate. It took me from a curious person to an advocate in a 40-minute call, and I've probably told 12 audiences and probably 1,000 people about his products since then. And all it took was, again, use the internet to get off the internet. Or in that particular case, it was a Skype call, but the whole point was it was a person-to-person interaction. One of the other things we do, of course, is that's the reason why we're heavy users of meetup.com, and we do a lot of tweet-ups. A tweet-up, by the way, for those of you who don't know, is probably the geekiest thing I've ever done originally, and now I do them all the time, and that's where you post on Twitter. There's a tweet-up here, and what it means is let's get people we know online but don't know offline to connect offline and deepen relationships. And what you'll find is that your relationship gets so strong online, they become some of your biggest advocates to help you share your content with the web, to interact, to defend your brand, to you name it. So find ways to use the internet to get off the internet if you want to shorten the cycle around social media ROI. And lastly, let's look at your launch plan. And I've got 6 minutes to run through 7 steps, so we're doing pretty good. Number 1, identify your goal. A client comes to me and says, I want a blog. Why? Well, because my competitors have one. That's a bad reason to have a blog. Or worse, they'll say, I want a blog. I'll go, why? Because during your seminar, you said I need a blog. I'll say, that's a worse reason to do it. The reason why you want to get involved in social is it complements and supports your core business goals. So number 1, know your core business goals and understand how social media is going to support those goals. It's really important to start with a goal. Number 2, identify your target audience and what Jay Levinson and I call your nano-tribes or nano-markets. It's not enough just to know your niche, because within that niche, what's going to happen is that if you send the same message out to that broad niche, what you're going to get, like let's say for Whistler Blackcomb, let's just send the same message out to all these snowboarders. Wow. There are so many different types of snowboarders. There's probably at least a dozen major segments that need specific messaging and interaction to make sure that you're really relevant and deep in that relationship. So make sure you know your nano tribes. Pick the right platforms for today, and also look in the future. Like, I'm not sure if I really need to even be on Nimble yet. But start using the tool before you really need it, okay? Experiment with tools like Google+. Look at other tools like Quora, which are coming upon the horizon, but aren't massively used yet because, you know what, they could be. It doesn't mean you spend all day in there, but invest enough to know a bit more than your competitors. Implement a listening and engagement strategy. Sorry, I missed something. Map out social media etiquette and policy. I could spend a whole hour on social media policy. I won't, but this is where your organization needs to start. You need a set of rules and guidelines for your team to understand what's appropriate and not appropriate online. I had a salesperson sit down for the marketing team who wants everybody to tweet, and she goes, I'm afraid to tweet. And I go, what? We said you can. She goes, I don't care. Have you seen the employee manual? She goes, I don't want to tweet. I think a few things I do can get me fired really quick. And they're like, well, no, it's okay. She goes, no, it's not. I want it in writing. And even a creative or promoter type person, we need to give them a set of guidelines so they can feel safe in which to interact and promote the company and the organization. And we also need it to protect the organization and the brand and our customers. There are a ton of wrongful dismissal suits going on right now for people because they were fired for something they said on Facebook or Twitter or their blog. Why? Not because what they did was right, but because no one specifically said it wasn't right. And so we need a social media policy to protect our customers, to protect our brand, and give our team a framework in which to operate. They need to sign off on that. They need to be trained how to use the tools, and then you send them out into the world. Otherwise, it's like giving your kid the keys to the car, no curfew, and no driving lessons, and going, what happened? Why did this go so bad? Well, that's why, because we didn't give any direction to anybody. So don't just be like, oh, well, they're under 25, so they get social media. No, they know how to use the tools, but they don't understand branding, PR, engagement, legalese. People need help at all levels. So then implement your listening strategy. Start monitoring. From that, you're going to know the core pains, dreams, and goals of your market, and then finally, start creating that content in those conversations. Okay? I think too often we start at number 7 and kind of work our way backwards once we get really busy. And I think if we can start this way and roll into it, it's going to give us a much better chance to succeed. So wrapping up here, social media is about being social. That's what it's about. It's not a video game. It's not about counting likes and collecting Twitter followers. That's one of the functions of what occurs as a result of us actually legitimately connecting and engaging with our marketplace in a relevant way. And the whole thing that we start with, I'm going to start right back with what I said in the Board of Trade. My teachings at the time with Darcy Rizak was, number one, you get out of a community what you put into it as a brand. And the first thing we should ask when we connect with someone is, what can I do to help this person? Thank you very much.